Revenge with Karen.
I knew Blaine was trouble the second he walked into that stand-up, wearing sunglasses indoors, and called our flagship AI integration, "Sweet, just some Python glue." But that's not where this story starts. No, it starts in a cramped, windowless conference room lit by the flickering overhead bulb that maintenance kept promising to fix. 12 overcaffeinated engineers, and I somehow made $180 million worth of product magic out of borrowed code, secondhand whiteboards, and half the budget we needed. If you've ever duct-taped enterprise architecture with Red Bull and Hope, you know the vibe. We were the Skunkworks, Apex Nova's special ops team they didn't advertise, but always leaned on when deadlines snarled and investor calls loomed. 12 of the sharpest minds I'd ever worked with. Logan, who could build a CI pipeline from scratch using only post-it notes and spite. Priya, who wrote rejects like it was haiku. Even Dylan, the jaded ex-Google guy who only smiled when mocking our Jira board, stayed because, in his words, at least here, my soul isn't a line item. They weren't just employees. We were something closer to a wolf pack with matching security badges. I wasn't their manager so much as their war-weary general, one who'd earned every ounce of respect through trench warfare with middle management. We built this platform from nothing. A modular control system that could plug into any industrial stack, learn patterns in days, and optimize performance in ways that made supply chain consultants look like toddlers with crayons. If Apex Nova had a future, it was sitting in our GitHub repo. Now, before I go on, gotta break the fourth wall here for just a second. Listen, I know a ton of you are probably lurking, enjoying the chaos, sipping your coffee, maybe even nodding like, yep, that tracks, but haven't subscribed. Over 93% of listeners don't hit that little button. It's free, it helps the algorithmic gods bless this mess, and honestly, it keeps my team motivated while we sort through these wild betrayals and corporate train wrecks. So hit subscribe, throw us a like, and let's get back to Blaine, the human PowerPoint transition. So how did I end up in charge of all this? 4 years ago, the original PM ghosted right before a product demo. I filled in. Then the dev lead flamed out mid-sprint. I stepped up. Eventually, leadership just shrugged and said, well, she's already doing the job, and gave me a title so long it didn't fit on business cards. But I didn't care. I wasn't here for titles. I was here because we were building something worth bleeding for. We weren't flashy. Our lab had more cables than chairs. The A/C was stuck on January in Siberia, and our coffee maker rattled like it had PTSD. But we had autonomy. Nobody micromanaged us, partly because we hit our KPIs, and partly because no one understood what we were building well enough to interfere. The only real tension came from above, the C-suite circus that kept changing hands every fiscal quarter like musical chairs played with stock options. But we stayed out of it, or at least, we tried, until the day the new vision memo dropped. That's when everything started shifting. HR started showing up to team meetings just to observe. Budgets got rerouted to strategic initiatives that somehow always involved consultants with vague titles and shinier shoes than deliverables. And worst of all, whispers started drifting down from upstairs that our product was nearing maturity and ready for operational integration. Translation, we'd done the hard part, and now some exec wanted to slap their name on it before launch. Still, I trusted the system. Trusted that delivering results would shield us, that being indispensable meant something. I thought meritocracy had a fighting chance, even in a place where the break room had motivational posters about disruptive synergy. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But that realization hadn't hit me yet, not fully. At this point in the story, I was still walking into work with my badge and my bulletproof optimism, planning out our next feature sprint like it actually mattered. I was sketching out plans for expanding our neural net capacity and drafting internal training docs for our junior devs, even brought in donuts on Fridays. Who the hell brings donuts to a battlefield? I did. Because deep down, I believed that if you built something valuable enough, if your team trusted you enough, and if your intent was good enough, the system couldn't just erase you. I was wrong, but we'll get there. For now, picture me standing at the front of our tiny war room, marker in hand, drawing up the last phase of rollout. We were 2 weeks from launch. 2. I was still smiling. Still saying things like, let's test this in staging first, just to be safe, and we'll document everything clean so handoff smooth. And right outside that door, Blaine was waiting, aviators on, clipboard in hand, already scheming, already deciding. I just didn't know it yet. Blaine showed up on a Thursday, like a bad update you didn't authorize. He had that freshly laminated MBA smell, like too much cologne, overconfident slides, the vague threat of mandatory team-building retreats. He didn't shake hands. He connected. He didn't ask questions. He challenged assumptions. And 5 minutes into his first meet and greet, he used the phrase low-hanging fruit so many times I thought he was pitching a juicer. He strutted into our lab with a smirk like he just inherited a toy he didn't know how to play with but fully intended to break anyway. He pointed at our Kanban board like it personally offended him, then turned to Logan, who wrote the scheduler that saved us $3 million in energy costs, and said, "You guys still use this sticky note crap." I should have walked out then. But I didn't, because I'd seen men like him before. Swagger without substance. Flash without follow-through. Kind of guy who referred to himself as a thought partner in one-on-ones, but had never shipped a line of code or debugged anything tougher than a coffee machine. He was the human embodiment of "don't touch that, it's working." Still, I tried. I offered to brief him on the platform. Sat with him, pulled up the modular build structure, walked him through our pipeline integrations, explained how the licensing worked, well, the public parts. His eyes glazed over around the third slide, waved me off, said, "I'm a big picture guy, Karen. I let my people handle the weeds." Spoiler, I was the people. And those weeds, they were load balancers, API endpoints, and 1,000 silent tripwires he didn't even know existed. By week 2, he was using words like synergies and streamlining. Said he wanted to break the dependency chain and unlock full engineer potential. Translation: he thought my leadership was getting in the way, that my role was optional. He even floated bringing in his old college buddy Travis to help operationalize delivery. Travis had no dev background, but he once managed a frozen yogurt chain that went viral on TikTok, so obviously qualified. The day it all clicked, the day I knew Blaine wasn't just clueless but dangerous, he called a 1-1. No agenda, just quick sync, Karen. Always beware a man who syncs without warning. I walked in, or closed behind me with that soft corporate click that always sounds more final than it should. Blaine leaned back in his chair like he'd just remembered he had vertebrae. "Karen," he said, stretching my name like a yoga instructor on Ambien, "you've done amazing work. Truly, everyone says so, but..." And there it was. The corporate guillotine. But he continued, "We're moving into a new phase. A phase that requires a different kind of leadership. Less hands-on, more decentralized. You understand, right? We need to empower the team." I blinked. "They're already empowered. They designed the system. I just keep the obstacles off their runway." He smiled the way snakes do in cartoons. "Exactly. And I think they're ready to fly solo." I folded my arms. "You're planning to cut me," he chuckled. "No one's getting cut. We're evolving. Roles shift. Needs change. We're going to let the engineers self-organize. Travis is going to facilitate that." "Travis?" I said flatly. He nodded like I just praised him. "He's got great instincts. Ran a retail operation during the pandemic. Very agile." I stared at him. "You're replacing engineering oversight with a guy who managed waffle cones?" Blaine gave me that smirk, his trademark, and said, "Don't get emotional, Karen. This isn't personal, it's just efficiency." Ah, there it was. The dagger disguised as logic. I stood up. "Do you realize this product exists because I negotiated the continuation of development through a contractor restructure when the budget got slashed, right?" He waved a hand. Right. The whole "we almost didn't survive Q2 thing. Great story. But this isn't about history. It's about trajectory." I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't scream or send a scathing Slack or whip out receipts yet. I just walked back to the lab and looked at my team. My people, they were in the zone, building, debugging, laughing about something Dylan said. They didn't know yet, but they would. And when they did, they'd remember who built this platform. Not Blaine, not Travis, me. It happened on a Monday. Of course it did. Mondays are where hope goes to get mugged by middle management. Blaine scheduled a team alignment huddle for 9 a.m. sharp in the main war room. That should have been the first red flag. Never showed up before 10 unless there was blood in the water. Second red flag, he brought bagels. Blaine doesn't do carbs. But there they were, all neatly laid out next to a tray of lukewarm coffee and a single paper napkin folded like it owed him rent. The engineers filed in half awake, clutching laptops, reusable water bottles, and whatever caffeine vessel was keeping them vertical. I was there early, as always, sketching out our velocity metrics for the sprint retrospective we were supposed to be doing. Blaine clapped his hands like a substitute teacher trying to win over 7th graders. "All right, team," he said. "Let's bring it in." I stood off to the side, confused. He hadn't told me he was running this meeting, but I let it ride. Maybe he was about to fumble his way through another one of his vision chats where he word saladed everyone into submission. He didn't. Cleared his throat. So, big changes. New quarter, new direction, and we're making some strategic adjustments to maximize throughput and minimize friction. You've all been doing fantastic work, seriously, couldn't be more impressed. But in order to optimize operations, we're pivoting. There was a pause. Priya blinked. Logan stopped mid-sip. No one knew what the hell he was saying. Then he dropped the grenade. "Effective immediately," Blaine said, adjusting his cuffs like a game show host. "Karen will be stepping away from the project. The team stays." Karen goes. Silence. Absolute physics-breaking silence. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. I waited for the punchline, for someone to yell gotcha, or for Travis to pop out of a filing cabinet with a Nerf gun. But no, just Blaine grinning like he'd just solved climate change with a PowerPoint. I looked at him, looked around the room, and I saw it. Wave of shock ripple across 12 brilliant faces. My team, my people. He didn't even look at me as he spoke. That was the part that almost got me. Not the firing, not the public ambush, the dismissal like I wasn't even there, like I was just a process to be deprecated. I didn't give him the satisfaction of asking questions, didn't demand an explanation, didn't even roll my eyes. I just closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. No tears, no raised voice. Just a nod to the room and one step toward the door. That's when Logan stood up. "Wait," he said, loud and clear. Blaine frowned. "Everything's fine, Logan, we're moving forward." But Logan didn't sit down. He grabbed his hoodie, unplugged his charger, and walked out behind me. Then Priya stood. Then Sam. Then Chen, Rachel, Dylan, Noor, Liam, and even quiet little Annika from QA. One by one, like dominoes, they rose. No speeches, no drama, just movement. Loyalty in motion. Blaine sputtered something about noncompliance and unauthorized walkouts, but his voice sounded far away, like static, like the ghost of authority. The last one to leave was Jason, the intern. He looked Blaine dead in the eye and said, "Guess your optimization plan needs a patch." I held the door as they filed out, heart thudding in my chest, fingers ice cold despite the heat radiating from my neck. Didn't say a word until we hit the parking lot. And even then, all I said was, "You didn't have to do that." Logan replied, "Yeah, we did. You built this. He just inherited it." Rachel added, "Let him find out the hard way who holds the keys." Dylan, he just muttered, "Screw that guy," and lit a cigarette. They didn't know what I had planned. Not yet. They didn't know about the contractor restructure or the modular license. The clause Blaine skipped because it was in small font and written in actual legalese. But they would. And so would Blaine. 6 months before Blaine ever stepped foot inside Apex Nova, I got an email at 2:13 a.m. from finance titled Urgent, R&D Budget Realignment. That's corporate for we just saw a shiny new idea and are about to gut yours. I remember staring at it, laptop balanced on my knees, cold cup of tea forgotten next to me, while the storm outside rattled my apartment windows. I clicked the PDF, read it twice, then once more just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from sleep deprivation. Sure enough, a 42% cut to our dev budget effective the following quarter. Non-essential modular experiments were to be paused indefinitely, which would have been fine if our entire product wasn't modular. The message was clear. They didn't get it. They never had. I did what any over-caffeinated, over-betrayed engineering lead would do. I started texting Logan. "Karen, they're freezing our R&D, retroactive to Q2. Logan, cool. So should I cancel the server spin-up or just burn the building down? Karen, neither. Yet, you still got that Delaware LLC you never used. Logan, yeah, why? Karen, I think it's time we build a firewall, a legal one." And that's when the seed was planted. I spent the next 2 weeks not just coding, but documenting. Everything: meeting notes, email threads, Git commits, design documents, contracts, Slack messages. I backed up every architectural decision into 2 separate encrypted repositories, one internal, one mine. Then I scheduled a meeting with legal. Now, Apex Nova's in-house counsel wasn't exactly a thrill ride, but they were competent and tired of scrambling after executives made promises they couldn't deliver on. Tired of being looped in too late. When I explained the situation, that the company was asking us to finish a system they were no longer willing to fund, I framed it not as rebellion, but liability protection. If I take this off the books, I said, and continue work under a separate contractor LLC, with clear licensing terms, you guys are actually safer. We reduce exposure, keep the IP clean. They raised eyebrows, asked smart questions. And in the end, they approved it, so long as the IP license was modular, revocable, and clearly delineated as external contractor work until full reintegration. I named the LLC Redline Modular Systems, because every architect knows red lines mean change. From that moment on, every new component, every upgraded patch, every performance tuning, every neural subroutine, through Redline, it didn't break any laws. It didn't even raise alarms, because on paper, I was just ensuring project continuity under budget constraints. And Blaine never asked. He showed up months later and skipped every single onboarding doc I'd prepared, blew past every SOP I handed over, scoffed at the 38-page implementation guide I wrote in case I got hit by a bus. He said, "Just give me the elevator pitch," and I did, handed him the keys to a Ferrari, and watched him assume it was a lawnmower. He didn't know that the licensing clause, tucked neatly in Appendix C of the modular integration contract, required my ongoing oversight for any use of Redline modules beyond the staging environment. And if that oversight was removed, Clause 7.2.1, license is automatically revoked. I'd written it on a weekend while making soup, because nothing fuels legal engineering like rage and lentils. The rest of the team didn't know either, not then. I didn't loop them in. I didn't need to. Their contracts were technically tied to Redline as experimental modular contributors. I'd made sure they got paid properly, documented their hours, and even handled the tax forms. To them, it was just how we'd kept working through the lean months. But in the eyes of the law, we're independent contractors working on modular components under a third-party agreement. So when they walked out that Monday morning behind me, they weren't breaking protocol. They were leaving a client engagement. The difference? Massive, untraceable, and totally invisible to Blaine, who still thought he was running the show. But the show had already been rewritten, and I was the one holding the script. It started with a text from Priya. "Priya, heads up, Blaine's calling everyone. Says he's rebuilding team synergy. Wants a chat." I was sitting on my porch, sipping lukewarm tea and listening to the quiet for the first time in 4 years. No back-to-back stand-ups, no Slack pings at midnight, no duct tape deployments before demo day. Just the wind, my laptop, and a silent inbox that hadn't screamed in hours. I stared at her message for a moment, then replied, "Karen, let me guess, wants to know when you're free to jump back in?" "Priya," said he's offering to restore continuity with a leadership-neutral structure. Neutral face Karen sounds like someone found the license notice, because by then the lights had already started flickering. The internal dev environment, which ran entirely on Redline's modular stack, was partially down. Nothing critical. Just access to the optimizer suite, the load prediction engine, the visualizer, the decision tree trainer. You know, the core features. The parts Blaine never understood but always bragged about in meetings. They weren't deleted, that would have been dramatic and frankly stupid. They were just unavailable until license terms were met, which legally they weren't. Meanwhile, I hadn't reached out to a single engineer. No cult leadership, no whispered instructions, no rally the troops speeches. I didn't need to, because I'd structured it right from the start. Each contributor, Priya, Logan, Dylan, the whole crew, had signed their Redline contracts individually. I'd made sure they had clean paperwork, separate NDAs, and clear project scopes. They weren't Apex Nova employees. They were Redline consultants. And when I was dismissed, their project lead was effectively terminated. Clause 4.3 in their contracts. In the event of project disruption, all contractor obligations are paused pending renegotiation, which meant if Blaine wanted them back, he'd have to do it through me, and I wasn't exactly answering his calls. I got updates through the grapevine. Logan, he offered me a key contributor bonus to come back, told him I'm focusing on other opportunities. Chen, he asked if I wanted to be part of something special again. I said I never left something special. Jason, he called me kiddo. I hung up. Weren't being petty, they were being exact. These were professionals who'd built something real, something complex and elegant, and they weren't going to hand it over to a man who thought version control was a fashion term. Somewhere in the background, Blaine must have figured it out. Maybe it was the disappearing modules. Maybe it was legal finally digging into the integration license. Maybe it was the silence, but he started panicking. He sent emails, voicemails, even tried looping in HR to offer clarification. The tone shifted fast, from smug to polite to desperate, like someone slowly realizing the safety net wasn't netting anything. But the team held firm. Because the truth is, we never built this system for them. We built it for ourselves, out of pride, out of spite, out of the sheer thrill of doing something right in a company that got everything wrong. Blaine didn't understand that. He thought leadership was proximity to a title, that control was volume. That vision meant repeating the word scale until your teeth fell out. But we'd built something resilient, distributed, self-sustaining, and now it was in the dark, just out of reach. I didn't need to fight Blaine in boardrooms or Slack threads or emergency Zooms. I'd already won. I won in the architecture, in the contracts. In the clause he didn't read because it was buried under miscellaneous legal terms on page 13. While he was flailing to reconstruct a team he'd never understood, I was sitting quietly at my kitchen table, reviewing a new round of contractor interest from a client who did understand modular control systems and who was willing to pay for the full license. All Blaine had was a bag of frozen bagels and an empty war room. Me, I had everything else, and I hadn't even turned the lights back on yet. It started with a flicker. Internal test bed for Apex Nova's Smart Flow predictive engine went offline at 11:06 a.m. on a Wednesday. Just a heartbeat. The dashboard refreshed, and instead of output graphs and uptime logs, it showed a blank screen with one sentence in tiny, polite font. License authorization expired. Contact Redline Systems to renew access. Blaine didn't notice at first. He was too busy pacing in front of the glass wall of conference room B, rehearsing for yet another investor check-in, where he'd regurgitate keywords like machine intelligence and synergistic deployment, without understanding a single variable underneath. But somewhere across the building, a product manager pinged IT. Then, a junior QA analyst opened a ticket. By 11:14, there were 5 separate emails with the subject line "Urgent Staging Broken." By 11:25, the director of operations, Ellen, walked into Blaine's office holding a tablet like it was a live grenade. "Do you know anything about a license termination notice?" she asked flatly. Blaine scoffed. "It's probably a firewall thing, or DevSec forgot to update the certs." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "It's affecting both staging and 2 client-facing demo environments." Now that got his attention. Demo environments meant sales, and sales meant revenue. And revenue meant stock options. He launched into panic mode denial like a man swatting imaginary bees. "Let's not overreact," he said, already tapping away at his keyboard. "Probably just a hiccup." A hiccup, sure, like the Titanic had a hiccup. By noon, 3 different enterprise clients had reached out via their account managers, all asking the same question in slightly panicked tones. "Why is our test integration offline? Where's the sandbox endpoint? Is there a breach?" Blaine called IT. Passed the buck to DevOps. DevOps couldn't access the control panel. They were getting the same polite message. By 1:30 p.m., Blaine was in the war room with legal, finance, and Ellen from Ops, trying to convince everyone that this was temporary back-end instability. He didn't look so confident now. His shirt was untucked in the back, collar wrinkled from sweat. He'd lost that smug lean in his chair. Now he was hunched, typing with the fury of a man trying to undo reality through brute force Slack messages. That's when Ellen said it again, slower this time. "I want to see the license structure." He hesitated. "We have full rights. It's our system." "No," she replied. "It's Redline system, and we were using it under a modular deployment agreement." "Correct." He opened his mouth, closed it, because that was the moment he remembered if he ever actually read it. Karen had filed the modular license with legal herself 6 months ago, and that she had been the designated license administrator, and that firing her had, per clause 7.2.1a, automatically revoked usage. Someone from legal finally spoke up. "We're checking the original documents. If access was tied to a revocable modular license under Redline, and if there's no current administrator assigned, it defaults to revoked," Ellen finished. Silence, not the good kind. The kind that's made of impending shareholder lawsuits and canceled contracts. Someone on the call coughed. Someone else quietly disconnected. Blaine started stammering, "Okay, but surely we can contact the team and their contractors," Ellen snapped. "They aren't obligated to do squat unless we renegotiate. You walk them out." You terminated the admin. Now you've got demo environments failing, while 3 enterprise clients are pinging us about breach of POC terms. Another silence. Then a slow, quiet intake of breath from Blaine. Meanwhile, across town, I was folding laundry. Literally folding laundry. Blue sky outside, jazz on low, and my phone vibrating gently with each new message from my old team. Dylan, they are in full meltdown. Blaine said the word escalate 6 times in one sentence. Yeah, someone finally read the contract. You legend. Logan, director of ops, just followed me on LinkedIn. Should I be flattered or terrified? I didn't reply right away. I was sipping my coffee, staring at a blinking cursor on an email draft to a potential client who was an Apex Nova and who did understand modular AI licensing. They'd already asked for proposal. Meanwhile, over at Apex Nova, Blaine was sweating through his overpriced dress shirt, watching the lights go red on his low-hanging fruit roadmap. Not with a bang, not with a hack, but with the quiet, devastating finality of a checkbox he never ticked. The message came in at 3:42 p.m., not from IT, not from DevOps, not even from legal. It came from Luther Vance, Apex Nova's most senior external partner. A man whose last documented emotion was back in 2009, when the Fed hiked interest rates mid-quarter. Subject line of his email was just 2 words. Explain, now, the body. Even shorter, why is the test platform offline? That's when Blaine's hands started shaking. The partner account was tied to Apex Nova's largest prospective contract, an 8-figure implementation that had taken 9 months of soft soaping, golf, steak dinners, and carefully curated jargon to get to pilot stage. Their test environment was supposed to be bulletproof. Showroom ready. Executives from 3 continents were logging in to see it run scenarios in real time. And now it was blank, silent, redlined. Blaine flew across the floor toward engineering ops like a man trying to catch a bus that left an hour ago. He didn't wait for permission, just barged into their space, yanked a chair, and typed like his life depended on it. And maybe it did. He navigated to the repo, clicked into the config files, scrolled past 3 ignored pull requests, one desperate comment from Dylan that said, "We need Karen's sign-off before release, per 7.2.1a." And finally, there it was. A single line of code, not even commented out, just sitting there, blinking back at him like a smirking ghost. / license access revoked by platform administrator K. Halden, Redline Systems LLC, and then the system log entry. Timestamped. Digitally signed. Verified by the integrated license manager. Redline modular license deactivated due to termination of oversight. See, clause 7.2.1a. That clause again, that got him clause. He stared at it like it was a foreign language, like it had personally betrayed him. His fingers hovered, helpless. He couldn't delete it, couldn't override it. Not without triggering the license breach alert that sent a notification straight to Redline's legal contact, which of course was me. He stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. Someone in the room asked, "Everything okay, Blaine?" He didn't answer. He just stormed down the hall like a man sprinting through a dream where all the doors keep changing. 2 minutes later, he was in Ellen's office again, waving the screen in front of her. She revoked it. Karen, she revoked the license. Ellen read the line, said nothing. Scrolled further, saw the clause, then the digital signature. She closed her laptop. Her voice was so calm it made Blaine flinch. "Call legal, now." He didn't move. She turned, slower this time, "Call them." Blaine mumbled something about how there must be a workaround, and it's just a misinterpretation of contract language. Ellen fixed him with a stare so cold it could freeze network traffic. She owns the license. She was the administrator. You terminated her role. That's exactly what the clause was designed for. Opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, he pulled out his phone and dialed. Across the city, I got a notification from the Redline dashboard. License access request initiated Apex Nova Inc. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer and took another sip of tea. The last of the sugar had melted. It was just bitter now. Perfect. The call with legal lasted 92 minutes. The first 40 were spent with Blaine insisting, loudly, frantically, and at one point with actual jazz hands, that the system was proprietary. That Apex Nova obviously owned everything. That Karen's LLC was just a formality. Then the attorneys spoke. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't blink. They just read, clause after clause. Timeline after timeline. Redline Modular Systems LLC, formed under Delaware statute. Licensing agreement, approved by internal counsel, signed by both parties. Clause 7.2.1a. License access contingent upon continuous administrative oversight. Oversight defined explicitly as K. Halden, acting agent of Redline Systems. And then the kill shot. Upon involuntary termination or removal of administrator by client, access to all active modules is suspended until reinstatement and formal license review. It was written in plain English. No ambiguity. No wiggle room. Ellen just leaned back, arms crossed, watching Blaine crumble one frantic rebuttal at a time. He kept throwing out buzzwords, platform integration continuity, corporate priority clauses, implied consent to operate. The lawyers stared back like priests watching a man try to outtalk God. At one point, he actually said, "Can't we just clone the modules and bypass her code?" Legal's lead counsel, a woman named Marissa, closed her binder and said, "Try that, and you won't just have a civil suit. You'll have a criminal one." And then she added, almost with pity, "You don't just have a licensing problem, Blaine. You have a contractual landmine, and you're standing on it." By Friday, the fallout had become a full-on data hemorrhage. 3 major clients had formally notified Apex Nova of material delivery failures and requested immediate compliance review meetings. The contract with Atlas Core, $19M client Blaine used as his personal TED talk anecdote, was frozen. Their email was short. "Until the system functions as demonstrated, we are suspending all payments." Shareholder whispers began within hours. The board called an emergency session. 2 directors skipped a fundraiser to be there. One dialed in from Europe at 2 a.m., and what they wanted wasn't status reports. They wanted names. Who authorized the license removal? Who ignored the original contractor structure? Who terminated the administrator without clause review? There was only one name that came up. Blaine. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. My name was never mentioned out loud in those meetings. Only whispered. Only referenced in footnotes. And in the blinking red notifications from the license dashboard that kept reminding everyone, access revoked, awaiting administrator reinstatement. The funniest part, I never touched a keyboard, never raised a stink on LinkedIn, never subtweeted, never wrote a Medium post titled "What Apex Nova Got Wrong." I didn't scream, I didn't threaten, I just waited. Because the thing about structures, legal, technical, emotional, is that if you build them right, they don't collapse when you walk away, they hold. And they choke the wrong hands when they grab too hard. My silence became louder than Blaine's panic. Each unanswered call, each ignored email, each test environment that refused to boot. He'd built his little empire on my foundation, and then pulled out the keystone. The lawyers couldn't fix it. The board couldn't fast-track a replacement, because I wasn't a bottleneck. I was the lock, and Blaine didn't have the keys. The invite came through on a Sunday night. Subject line, conversation redline access pathways. No apology, no context. Just a meeting link at a time, to note that the full board would be present. I stared at it for a second, then forwarded it to my attorney, Alina, with a simple message. "Bring the clause binder." She replied with a thumbs up and a PDF titled "The Karen Clause Final Draft." We arrived 12 minutes early, dressed like a court case, and a merger had a baby. Blaine was already in the conference room, slouched in a chair like he'd been there all night, eyes puffy, tie crooked. He didn't say a word when I entered, just blinked like he'd seen a ghost that might invoice him. The board was all there, half in person, half dialed in. Ellen sat at the far end, calm as a coma. Marissa from legal nodded at me once. Everyone else just stared, waiting for the showdown. Karen, the chairman, began, smoothing his cuffs like the words might wrinkle them. "We'd like to find a path forward that benefits all parties." Translation: "We're bleeding out and don't know how to tourniquet this without you." Opened my folder. Alina clicked her pen. "My terms," I said, "no preamble, no soft landing, just the truth. 1. Immediate reinstatement as license administrator, non-revocable for the duration of the current platform lifecycle. 2. Full administrative oversight of any system touching Redline modules. 3. Compensation package adjusted to reflect market disruption impact, triple previous base salary, backdated to termination date. 4. Public correction of my departure to clarify contractor oversight status, not performance-based removal. 5. Blaine is not in any meeting, room, thread, or policy affecting technical operations. Ever again. I closed the folder. Silence. Blaine opened his mouth. The chairman raised one hand and said, "You're excused." Blaine blinked. "What? You're done, Blaine." Security didn't escort him. No yelling. Just a slow, quiet walk out of frame. He paused at the door, looked at me. Still, I didn't gloat. I turned back to the board. The red line system can be restored within 48 hours of license reactivation. We'll need to re-verify endpoint integrity and rebuild staging environments. But the clients will be online again by end of week. The chairman nodded. Done. They took a formal vote. All in favor. 0 opposition. Ellen slid a new badge across the table. No photo. No HR orientation. No onboarding Slack. Just a title. Platform custodian by design, not permission. Later that day, I logged into the old dev thread. The team was already there, quietly watching. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Priya sent the first emoji, locked, then Dylan. Then Jason, then the rest. One by one, 12 engineers, one lock. And this time, the key was exactly where it belonged. Funny thing about control, it only works if you read the fine print on who holds the keys. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.